Disclaimer. This story is a continuation of the stories told by Kurt Reimert in 1981 through 1982. While this story is written as fun and light entertainment, it addresses issues and observations from the 1970s. The fact that history is repeating itself requires me to mention that this story has been in the works for over 20 years. Any similarities between the issues from the 1970s and now is purely coincidental. I have kept the use of foul language to a minimum, both because I did not see the need for much of it, and because such words are more valuable when they are few. That said, I hope that Kurt, wherever he is, likes what I have done to add on to his story. Return of the Exiled, or Why Must I Be the Hero? By T.J. Stegaheis. Read by Yob. Dedicated to Kurt Reimert, whose stories inspired this work. Requiescat in pace. Chapter 2. Smoke of Tor. Smoke wended carefully through the narrow alleyway on his way to a meeting about an upcoming burglary. Why Bain always held the gang's meetings in such filthy places he didn't know. Despite what the local riffle-raffle would tell you, gnomes did not like filth. They just put up with it like everything else. Today the gang was to meet Bain in an unused section of the sewers. As was usual, Smoke made his way there through his own seldom-used paths, including cutting right through a fancy dance hall at one point. He picked up an old serving tray from the alley, pieces of a broken glass, and slipped through the front door and walked in a servile manner from the front door to the kitchen. To those patrons who caught a glimpse of him, he appeared to be a servant cleaning up after a mishap. The kitchen cellar was connected to the sewer via an old floor grate. It was a greasy, dirty hole, but no worse than the kitchen itself. As he always did, Smoke arrived early to case the setup. A dark, complicated space with plenty of places to hide, the meeting place was acceptable by the standards of the Thieves' Guild. Smoke found a good place to wait in concealment for the others to arrive. Soon they came in. Bain held a smoky, greasy lantern. He was accompanied by 6 hooded figures, crowded into the dim open area. Bain was a fat, belligerent human who became a thief because he had failed at everything else. He rose through the ranks by deception and violence. Smoke only worked for him because he had been short on his dues to the guild last month. The guildmaster had assigned them together to see if the combination was profitable. 2 more jobs, and Smoke could return to operating alone, away from Bain and his foul attitude. "Looks like Smoke decided he was too good to join us down here," began Bain in a taunting voice. "I guess he doesn't want to be a thief in Riston." "Don't be a yacker," Smoke called back. "I was just making sure that it was you." Smoke walked out into the dim light, and suddenly the other figures crowded around him and threw off their hoods. A few more figures rushed in, and Smoke found himself in the strong arms of the town guardsman. "Let's see you puff your way out of this one, Smoke," sneered Bain as he accepted a few coins from a guard. "Yes, sir," he addressed the man in charge. "You can now tell your captain that you finally caught the master burglar of Riston City." "Hey, thanks for the promotion," Smoke called back cheerily. "I always knew that I was the only real talent in your gang." The guards showed their appreciation for his wit by pummeling his gut. Bain was chuckling merrily as they dragged Smoke away. The journey to the fortress was a painful blur, punctuated by slaps and kicks. When he could readjust his wits, he was in a large cell with a motley group of other unfortunates awaiting their fate. Smoke knew one thing for certain: he would live long enough to repay Bain for breaking the oath and turning him in. And if Bain had turned Smoke in as a substitute for himself, Smoke would get the word out to others in the guild, and Bain's life would not be worth dung. Smoke looked about while he rested and took in stock of his situation. There were maybe 12 to 15 men in the cell, and perhaps half that many women. The cell was large, and the genders gathered well away from each other. Unusually, he seemed to be the only gnome there. There were 4 tiny barred windows, 2 on each of opposite walls near the ceiling, 4 columns supporting the ceiling, and 1 metal-bound door with 1 window, well barred and well guarded. The windows were an unexpected luxury and must have been left over from King Leopold's reign. Taking some time to recover and gather his wits, Smoke thought back to his youth. His father, Mircea, had been so proud of the little fruit and vegetable stall he had built in the business he had started from a broken-down old pushcart to a proper full-time stall in Riston City town market. Smoke, then named Stevo, had worked there as a child and grown to know the business well, so that when his father was too old to keep it going, Smoke would take it over. They had not reckoned with sly old Camden the fence. The fruit stall faced the second-hand parlor that Camden used as a front for his fence operation, and would make a perfect lookout station to warn Camden of any trouble coming into the store. First he tried to hire Stevo and his father to be his lookouts. The elder gnome was appalled and threatened to call the town watch. Second, he threatened Stevo's father and had him beaten to make his point. Unfortunately, the thugs Camden hired to do the beating were too rough, and the old gnome never recovered. Finally, as Stevo continued to resist his threats, Camden had his men plant stolen items in the family home and rigged up evidence to suggest that the thief was Stevo. This worked. They arrested Stevo and threw him in prison. They threw his family out of town. Town council put his fruit stand up for auction, and Camden bought it. While in prison, Stevo met other gnomes with stories much like his own. They taught him the skills of thievery and burglary, as well as other skills valuable to thieves. Once released, Stevo put these skills to use. As his reputation grew, Stevo changed his name to Smoke, as he escaped capture like a puff of smoke. He improved his ability to disappear by operating part-time in Tai and part-time in Riston City. This meant paying dues to 2 guilds, but proved to be worth it. He finally got his revenge by robbing a noble's home and planting the goods in Camden's shop, where they were found, but he could never go back to working in the market. Like it or not, he was a thief now. Over the years, he did have his share of close encounters. Once, when he was burglarizing the home of a miserly trader, the old man had somehow gotten word on the wind that Smoke was coming and set a trap for him. As soon as Smoke entered the strong room, the door slammed shut and he could hear a heavy bar being set into place. Smoke cursed himself for having not detected the trap. The old man must have been laying in wait in a nearby cupboard. The potential prize was big. The room had enough gold and expensive trade goods for a candy gnome to retire. Now the only thing Smoke wanted to find was a way out, and he found one. The builders had included the strong room in the ventilation scheme, and a great covered opening big enough for him to pass through was set high into a wall. Smoke stacked a chair on top of the crate of fabrics that lay under the opening. With his pry bar, Smoke tested the strength of the grate. It came loose but with a slight noise as the nails pulled free of the old wood. Smoke went to the door and listened. The trader was giving instructions to his servants to watch the door. "Don't let that miscreant out, whatever may happen," he said. "I'm off to fetch the town watch." As soon as the sound of the gate indicated that he was gone, Smoke heard a cork pop and cups being filled. The servants were pilfering their master's wine as they sat guard, as was common amongst the underpaid staff of such men. Smoke selected 2 small bags of coins as portable enough to bring along and climbed up to the opening. He carefully pushed the opposite grate off and climbed onto the surface he found on the other side. He reversed back to the opening and pushed the chair clear off the grate and pulled the grate up. He used some cords to tie the grate passing through the opposite grate and tied them fast so the two held each other in place. He hoped that this would delay the detection of his method of escape. He slid himself back to the edge and felt around for some kind of foothold. There seemed to be a series of tiny steps or rungs for him to climb down. Mystified and concerned at such a convenience, he climbed down carefully, being as quiet as he could. He only descended about his own height before finding the bottom. His foot slipped and he had to grasp the top to keep from falling and alarming the servants. Feeling around his feet, Smoke found scattered papers and quills. He was standing on the man's desk. The rungs he had climbed down were the pigeonholes for filing. Drat and brickle nuts! He was out of the strong room, but still trapped. He explored the room in the pitch dark. He could hear the murmur of the servants' voices on the other side of the door. He backed up and found a set of high shelves. Thinking that he might hide on top of a shelf or some such place, he climbed up to explore. A piece of carpeting was folded against the wall and at the top of the shelves. When he moved it, his nose was assaulted by a foul smell. The kitchen. Now, as in many houses, the kitchen was pushed as far to the outside as the builders could manage with the space they had. In this case, it was more part of the stables than the house. The moisture and grease of the many meals prepared there had softened the wood enough that little effort was needed to silently remove the grate and climb down onto the cook's table. Just as before, he slipped and almost fell, this time on the foul grease. He once again replaced the grates, tying them in place with some cord. He thought to himself, he had likely saved someone from having the heavy grate drop on top of them when the wood finally gave way. Careful to avoid a figure sleeping on the floor near the glowing fireplace, he explored. A door from the kitchen opened into a paneled passageway with 4 doors, one accessing the stables near the privy. Here there was an even fouler stench. He treaded quietly to the door to the stables. He peeped through the door. A little moonlight filtered through 2 high windows. There were no horses in the miser's stable, only piles of cheap trade goods waiting for someone on whom he could unload them. Smoke silently crossed to the small door to the courtyard and found it quiet. A stray board from the stable used as a ramp up the wall, and he was out in the side street. A dark alleyway loomed across the street, and he quickly slipped into the welcoming darkness. Unfortunately, this was a dead-end alley, and he needed to be further away quickly. At the end of the cluttered alley, someone was using the space to store several heavy boards, probably planning some repairs. They were leaned upright against the end wall. To a gnome like Smoke, this was an easy road to the roof, and he went up, over, and on his way. Another time, the servants of a baron thought they had him outfoxed. They had him trapped in the stable, placing men at each possible opening. Smoke had almost run out of options when he discovered an unused storage compartment built into the underneath of the baron's fancy carriage. The buildup of polish, the seams of the opening showed that the baron had not used the compartment for years, and likely did not know of it. The latch was obligingly frozen, and Smoke carefully broke it in a fashion that would not be easily detected. He slipped inside and used a small cord to pull up and hold the door closed. When the chief servant returned with the town watch, they searched the stable for an hour with lanterns, poking into every nook. Please don't set the stable on fire with those lanterns, thought Smoke. I'm almost free. Soon after, the baron arrived and insisted that he be taken to a meeting he had with some important people. Smoke had no choice but to ride along. Upon their arrival, the baron disembarked from the carriage and passed some strange words with another person. During the odd conversation, it became apparent to Smoke that this was a meeting of the notorious and feared School of the Blood, and Baron Gettelfor was a member. Smoke waited until it was quiet to breathe again. Letting himself out, Smoke considered his options. To rob anyone in the meeting would likely be fatal, so he waited for the driver to go off and relieve himself and entered the carriage's passenger compartment. There was not much to take: a fancy cane, a silk scarf, and a case of important-looking papers. He took all that and quickly made his way to a nearby road to figure out where he was and how to get back to Tai, where he was working at the time. The case contained some very sensitive military documents that would have to be handled with the greatest care. If the School of the Blood found out that he had them, his life would be cut very short indeed. The cane and scarf bought him some food and paid his dues to the Thieves' Guild, so he made out well enough. After all, he was still alive.